I became a Christian after being, for most of my life, atheist.
You know, I do spend a lot of my life interviewing young Adventists and former Adventists, and I have been doing this for years. I've interviewed over 1,000 people.
Oh, wow. These people that I'm supposed to love and supposed to care for, they are not eating right, they are not dressing right, they are not doing right.
So when you go to a church, you sit through the program and you do not see kindness, you do not see gentleness, you do not see self-control, you do not see these fruits of the Spirit. What that tells me is that you are not seeing God at work for whatever reason. Is the expectation for an Adventist church, and yet in so many different cultures, a suit and tie is never, it's not from their land, it's not what's formal to them, it's what's Adventist.
So my very first question to you is, where do you think we as a church have failed our young people?
Yeah, I think the simplest answer is an easy one and a hard one, at least for the Seventh-day Adventist Church and a lot of Christianity in the United States especially. We forgot the principles behind the rules. And this is the same thing that Jesus was actually dealing with when he came into the world, when he started talking to his church, his upbringing, his religion. They'd forgotten why they do the things that they do. They forgot the spirit of the God behind everything. Where we fail our young people is we give them all of these expectations, rules, traditions, cultural norms, ways of doing programs that they're supposed to follow without them ever understanding why. And in a lot of ways, a lot of times when we do those things, we have generationally been part of them without understanding the real meaning behind them. When you talk about something as simple as your health, your body, your mind, your mental health, it can tend to come down to things you're not allowed to eat, things you're allowed to eat, right? The day that you go to church, the day you don't go to church, all of these different things. And yet you'll have people who are burning out in their jobs. You'll have people who are very overwhelmed, don't get enough rest because church has put things on them. When you talk about something like community, ideally, a church is supposed to exist to bring believers together to meet each other, to form relationships. Yeah. But very often, if you have to choose between a church program and community, which would be maybe not at the church, they'll choose the program. So for the most part, we've got kind of the shell of what God had maybe intended for our faith to be, without the real heart behind it. And so, yeah, I think the biggest misstep and the cry from young people has been to, hey, I see this Jesus and Jesus is compelling. I don't see that in church. This church thing is a completely different thing than what I see in Jesus' life and character.
Yes, and I am so excited that I invited you because it's like this is the kind of thing that sometimes it's easy for me to see and sometimes hard to express, and finding people that they are seeing this. I remember one time, and just to share a little experience that I went through. So I became a Christian after being, for most of my life, atheist.
Okay.
And it's so interesting that I went from one extreme of not believing in God, not wanting to do anything to do with God or religion, and then I went to the extreme of legalism. So it went from one extreme to the other extreme, and the devil loves to do that. You go from one ditch to the other ditch. And I remember I went to be a missionary in the Amazon. So why do you want to be a missionary? Because you want to do God's mission, you want to care for people. And I got there, and all I wanted to do was, these people that I'm supposed to love and supposed to care for, they are not eating right, they are not dressing right, they are not doing right. It was the beginning, it was immaturity, but today I look back and I see why God held me back then. Why he did not allow me to move forward with the things that I wanted to do. He didn't give me a mic. I had a mic, but I didn't have a mic. It's a long story. But anyways, when I look back, do you really think some of the women that I was supposed to help, they dressed, let's say, not with a lot of clothing.
Mhm.
And all I was concerned was, this is so disrespectful. But then later on, I would learn about their lives, and they were being abused by their husbands, and there had been a series of traumas and traumas. And sometimes we come and we want them to change the way that they eat, the way that they dress, and we don't look at what's happening in their own houses. Like how they're suffering. It's like, I'm sorry, but clothing is the last thing they're going to think about it when they have so much going on internally.
Yeah.
So, yes,
I
go
think
ahead.
modesty is a great topic for this. What human beings wear in their normal day-to-day life, what's formal, what's not formal, what you're allowed to show, what you're not allowed to show, has changed a lot. And it's very different now than it was in Jesus' day. There are things that people would have worn in that time that we would think is immodest.
And I don't even think we need to go as far as Jesus' time.
Yeah.
Just a couple decades ago.
Mhm.
And correct me if you think that this is my theory. It's also things like the different generations have different values.
Yep.
For an example, dressing down, not putting a tie, or the skirt and the dress for women. For the older generation, that is a high value because that shows to them disrespect.
Yep.
But for the younger generation, they're struggling so many other things that, first of all, they are not intentionally wanting to disrespect you. Can you see this dynamic between the different values
and cultures? So we put a lot of I have a good friend, Kevin, who grew up in across the world from me, and he always talks about how a suit and tie is the expectation for an Adventist church. And yet in so many different cultures, a suit and tie it's not from their land. It's not what's formal to them. It's what's Adventist, right? It's not. And so, even once you get into this formality thing, we have so much culturally ingrained with us that's not biblical at all. It's not tied to Jesus. It's all just kind of what we're brought up with to expect.
I don't even think it started with Adventist. I think it started with the Puritanism ideas. It came through Christianity, and we just inherited all of that as, if you're a good Christian, this is how you're going to dress. It doesn't matter that you are going to be a missionary in the middle of Africa where it's burning hot, 100 degrees outside. But we tell them, if you are a Christian, you dress this way. I'm not talking about some tribes that they were completely naked. I'm not saying that. Modesty is still important. But how about lighter fabric? Different styles that doesn't hold the heat as much. But then we tell them, and I can understand that, because when I first came to church, not understand Christianity at all, I wanted to do everything perfect. And it's easy for us to fall into that trap, not understand we're in love with God, and we think that what any Christian says is true. That becomes very hard. I wanted to get to know you a little more. So for those watching, we got right into a hot topic. We did not beat around the bush. But this is my friend Caleb. He has a podcast called Bridges Over Walls, right?
Yep.
Watch me saying the wrong name here.
No worries.
But I don't think we ever sat down to talk, right? This is actually the first time that we're going to be talking. I have admired your work from a distance. I love what you do. But I have not got to know you. So let's back up a little and tell me a little bit about you. Growing up, where you're from, who are you?
Yeah, big, complicated question. I try to keep it concise as much as possible. My name's Caleb. I live in the Portland, Oregon area. I'm 33 years old. I have a long, complicated career history. I've done a lot of things, until I kind of fell into storytelling and media and journalism work. I'd really worked all kinds of blue collar, dirty jobs. So put myself through college mostly off of Craigslist jobs. Did all sorts of things. Grew up in a construction family. So I was carrying brick and mixing mortar at probably 7, 8 years old. And that was our whole existence really outside of school was work. My background, my family on both sides grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist church back probably to the days of Ellen White. And so, on one side, my grandfather was drafted into Vietnam, and he was a white coat. He was a conscientious objector. And so all tied through Adventist history, my family has been part of these big moments. And so I've come into the...
Forgive
What's that?
me if sometimes I don't understand the terminology. It's because I wasn't raised Seventh-day
Yeah, yeah,
Adventist.
yeah.
The conscious something that you just said. Can you?
Conscientious objector.
Okay, what is that?
Yeah. So a principle that Adventism used to really hold strongly to was this idea of not murdering, including in the military. So we were a much more of a pacifist people than we are now. And so during the Vietnam draft, there were a lot of Adventist teenagers that were drafted and forced into the military. And for those who said, I will not hold a gun, I will not kill another human being, they were actually sent to be medically tested on. So Adventists, primarily the white coats, were a group of Seventh-day Adventists who said, I would rather you test experimental vaccines and technologies and things on me than me kill another person.
Oh, they tested on them.
Yes. So our own people, that was their punishment for not being willing to play by the rules. They're like, okay, here's your option. If you're not going to help us go, enact war, you're going to be basically experimented on. And so that's deeply part of my family history, but also part of Adventist history at the time.
I think that's why. What is the story? Is Desmond the one that?
Desmond Doss.
Yeah, he decided not to hold a gun.
Yep.
So that I am sure it's a story that became highly romanticized, but I'm
Yeah.
sure he struggled a lot
Mm-hmm.
with what happened.
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up in the church. I went through all the Adventist school system. My parents got divorced when I was 6 years old, which was very unpopular. I was in a very conservative church. Met my wife in academy, and yeah. So all of this kind of was not just my religious belief, but my culture and the culture of my family. And in my early life, I really started having some real problems.
That was my next question,
Yeah.
especially with the history that you had. How did that affect your relationship with God?
Yeah. I've always been a big thinker. I always had big questions. I remember being in a third or fourth grade class and just asking about, dinosaurs and theology and, well, if God has existed forever, then what was the first thing ever created? And well, how can sin go away forever? Do you take away the possibility that it could ever happen again if you never run out of time? All of these big questions at an early age.
Would that allow for free will to still exist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we still have free will after all this?
Yeah, it's you have the mind of an atheist.
Yeah. So yeah, and in some ways, the one thing that I've always held to, even when I disconnected from the church, because my big question
you got to a point that you disconnected from the church.
Yeah, I stopped going for several years. In my early 20s, I was married. My wife and I got married very young. We were very, very poor. And so we were really struggling to even drive to church. And I was working full time, both when I was in and out of college and when I was in classes. I was still working every available hour that I could when I wasn't sleeping, just to have groceries and pay college tuition and rent and all of this stuff. And the problem that I really had overall, I'm okay with a fair amount of disagreement in theology around me and that kind of thing. And it wasn't this like, well, I can't believe God exists kind of thing. It was more, if God exists and if God is a God of love, then why don't his people care about other people? That was the bottom line. And I was living in poor areas. I was living a poor life. And I'm like, how is it that I can come to church over and over and over and over, and nobody knows that I'm struggling to be here? Nobody knows that what I'm go through each week. If my car broke down, the question wouldn't be, how can we help? It'd be, why aren't you in church? And so I really started just saying, like, I think church is in the way of my relationship with God. I think that the biggest obstacle for me with God is not him at all. It's not the Bible or anything like that. It's actually church. It's this system of going into a program week after week after week, singing amongst ourselves the same songs, preaching the same Revelation seminars, doing the same thing over and over and over. And it's almost just like a recitement class. Like I didn't feel the depth and the meaning that I saw when I read the stories of Jesus. When I read the stories of Jesus, he's constantly in community with people. He's in their homes. He's spending his life there. Church was secondary. The service was secondary. The programming was secondary. But his involvement in healing ministry and getting to know people and relational things, that was his whole. I mean, it drastically outshines the amount of time that you see him in a building.
One of the seminars that I do, and by the way, I'm Brazilians. We talk on top of each other.
No worries.
Like I get excited. You said something like just remember where you were. When I do seminars, I love the concept of growing young and growing together, which touches a lot on what you're talking about. And one of the things that we emphasize is the part of the Bible in John that says, they will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And I stopped the church and I asked them, let's be honest.
Yep.
If somebody will talk about our church, is that why they know us? And people are just quiet. It's interesting how some churches are in complete denial. They think, oh, we're so welcoming, we're so nice. And there is a few that are, let's not generalize. But unfortunately, that's not what we're known for.
Yep.
Because we love one another. So I don't see what you're saying as, oh my God, he's criticizing the church. No, I see this as we need to understand this so we can change.
Yep.
And you are not alone.
Everything that I say is with the intent and the hope that we become what we were always meant to be, that we become a Christ-centered community of people who are doing and living out ministry and life in the way that he always wanted us to. So it's not, I will get to this in my story sometime, but I've been taken a lot of different ways. I've been taken as a church antagonist in some parts of life when I never was trying to, but, were the prophets antagonists? Was Jesus an antagonist? Each time that you have the church diverting from the path that God has always called it to be, you have to have people who call it back and keep it accountable. And so it's all about accountability. It's not, I'm not an expert. I'm just a person living life alongside everybody else. But, I do spend a lot of my life interviewing young Adventists and former Adventists. And I have been doing this for years. I've interviewed over 1,000 people.
Oh, wow.
In less than 10 years. And I see commonalities. I see trends in that. And over, you hear the same thing. People go where they feel loved. People go where they feel safe and included. And when the church is not that, it doesn't matter if you're, saying facts and details from the Bible that might be logically correct. You're still wrong in that you've missed the spirit of it all, the point of it all, the purpose. And so it's getting back to that purpose. It's getting back to those principles behind all of that I think would really start to repair the relationships. And it's ultimately what led me back to the church.
And that is one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you, because it's very easy to sit in a pew, to sit at home and criticize those that are trying to create a change and say, see, he's antagonist, he's against the church, he's criticizing the church. Sure, there's a danger there. And I like to make it clear when I'm doing these interviews, we are bringing awareness to the negative so we can change and we can stop losing people. And I'm going to be honest with you. It got to a point that I did not care for church. Well, before I became a Christian, I hate religion. I hated church because, especially if you think things here may be bad, you have no idea how it is in my country. People sell churches, like a business. Okay.
Yeah.
So the idea that I had a church, and this is not our denomination, this was Christianity in general. So I had a really bad taste of what church was. Then I came to the church. I had my legalistic phase. Then God brought me to some kind of a balance. But then when God showed me that people are more important than anything else, I did start getting a negative taste for the church because of the behavior of the church. And God slowly started showing me that church is important. Now, church may not look like what God has put in my heart, that church is important, may not look like what we think it does. Church may be that community that you feel safe, that you meet in the living room. because church is a community of people that are helping each other grow and come closer to Christ. It can work in a building, a traditional building. It can also work in your living room, but what makes it work or not is if we're showing the fruits of Christ.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not working.
Yeah. I take there are a lot of, you ask each Christian which Bible verses kind of guide their life, and you'll get all different answers. A lot of Christians are very based on whether I go to heaven or not, or I don't want to go to hell or not. For me, I take the fruits of the Spirit thing really literally. Where we see these things, we see God. Where you see love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, that is the Spirit of God at work. So when you go to a church, you sit through the program and you do not see kindness, you do not see gentleness, you do not see self-control, you do not see these fruits of the Spirit. What that tells me is that you are not seeing God at work for whatever reason, right? And so I tend to judge the environments, the communities that I interact with by how they treat people, because the Bible says that that's what it's about. and when I meet people in real life, even if they haven't, with their words and everything, maybe they're not going to church the same way I am, maybe they're not the same religion as I am, but when I see the Spirit of God working in their life, I have hope that God's working with them, whether they have the same religious label as me or not, because the Bible says that that's what it looks like when God is at work.
Yes.
And so I think that that's something, when going back to your question of kind of this generational breakdown, it's like, why do you care so much about the clothes I'm wearing? Why do you care so much about the money that I make, or the songs that I sing, or the specific program that I'm attending, when you don't seem to care about how we treat each other, when you don't seem to care about this church's involvement with its suffering neighbors? And when they talk about their positions on things, when they talk about how to engage with politics, when they talk about how to engage with money, when they talk about how to engage with creating programs, are they really focused on alleviating the suffering of people and creating healing in those communities? Or are they mostly focused on keeping the institutional side of their things going?
And sometimes it's the institutional side, sometimes it's just their taste. This is how I grew up, this is how I know, this is the only right way because this is the way that I know.
Right.
And to the point that we don't know how to differentiate what is God's principles and what are traditions that I'm used to it. And we put everything in the same bucket, judge everything in the same level without thinking, who am I pushing away from the church? Who am I pushing away from God? And the first thing when people start hearing people talking like me and you, they go like, what are you saying? Are we going to lower God's standards and principles just to keep the young people or to attract people? So first of all, what do you answer to that?
I answer that those were never God's standards. For example, let's talk about hymns. Okay. Hymns, go to some churches and they think anything outside of hymns are not religious. They're not godly. I hate to tell them, but hymns were written way after Jesus was here. There were no hymns in the Bible. In fact, percussion was a really important instrument in biblical music.
And I think every single song that is in the hymnals, every single hymnal, at one point were secular.
Yes. Yeah, there was a whole debate about whether an organ was sacrilegious at the time because it had been used in bars. Now, the organ sound is like the sound of traditional Christianity. But that's new. That's within the past few hundred years. But it's not biblical.
The most horrible part of it, that is my first, I think, 5 to 10 years of Christianity, I fell for all of that, including like, I read the books, I saw the CDs, we would used to pass out CDs that it would talk about the syncopation, and if any song would make you go like this is of the devil. And then I'm Brazilian, I can go like this to the hymn.
Well, and we don't look closely enough at where those things come from. When you look into especially the fear-based things, the music wars, the entertainment wars about movies, the book series, whichever new book series they're going after, there is a financial incentive for ministries to start that scare people into buying books about how bad other things are, or buying CDs about how bad other things are. And unfortunately, it's this, whether that person intends to do that in the beginning or not, it becomes where, to stay alive, to continue that ministry, you have to continue to scare people into it. It's a model that does not work if everybody is just healthy and they have a healthy critical view of the world.
Isn't it horrible to think that that is just like the world works? Because right now we already have all of these conspiracy theories regarding AI,
Yep.
you know? And when I start looking at it, sometimes I question, why did God allow me to go through these different phases of Christianity, where first I was so in love that I want to do everything perfect. I went completely legalistic. I had kind of like a crash course of what Christianity is. I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly within the first few years.
Yeah.
But then when I look back, I think that God allowed me to go through all of that exactly because now nothing surprises me. Instead of falling for everything like I felt at the beginning, I would literally fall for anything.
Yeah.
Okay. All because they're going to poison the water before 2008. You're too young. You probably don't even remember that. But anyways, the graves outside of Atlanta and so many things that I felt completely for it. Today, when they started, my sister, she sent me a video regarding AI and these horrible things that is going to happen. And I was like, so I started talking to her and I was like, she goes, but you don't think none of this could happen? I was like, okay, let's look at the bigger picture.
Yep.
Before Jesus comes back, things are going to get bad. How are they going to get bad? I'm not sure. Could it be the AI taking over the world? I don't know. The thing is, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You put your trust in God because God is more powerful than anything else.
Yep.
So how about focusing on taking people to Jesus and stop looking at these little details, you know, that it just takes people away from Jesus. They think, oh, I remember that when I was in my legalistic crazy phase, my brother-in-law started becoming interested in studying with us, my husband and I, because of all of the crazy conspiracies that we Seventh-day Adventists love.
Yep.
But people that come because of that, they don't stay. You know, as soon as the conspiracy date expires, we lose credibility. That's what people don't understand.
And it's this cycle. So humanity goes on this cycle with religion and other things, where if you don't have a lot of structure, if you don't have a lot of understanding of like, how do I decide my ethics? How do I decide how to live my life? How do I understand the point of waking up every day, what I do? If you don't have a lot in place already, then you lean towards structure. And so it generally is that somebody in a chaotic place shows up to some kind of revelation seminar or some kind of outreach, and it's the people in chaos that are craving some kind of structure that fall the hardest into whatever that really rigid, legalistic type of religion is. Because suddenly it's like, okay, now I have rules. Now I know what's good, what's bad. Now I have a system that I can live my life.
It's safe. I can control it. They think they can control it. You know, it's our ignorance thinking that we can control anything in life. You know?
And there's a way to feel like you're doing better than you were. You have a measurement, right? But it's also true that if you grow up in a highly rigid, legalistic structure, you're going to, it's like the harder you squeeze somebody, the more they're going to try to break free, right? And so we have both things going on where people come into the church traditionally through fear-based things from a chaotic part in life, right? But it doesn't work when somebody's in a healthy spot of life. They tend to be more resistant to that kind of thing. And so we see this immediate kind of like, aha, we're baptizing a lot of people. We're getting them to come to Bible studies through fear-based evangelism, because that's the way that our brains work, right? But until you have something where a person in a healthy spot finds it compelling and can really say, like, I want to be part of this. Like, I respect what you're doing. I love what you're about. And boy, that's the best way to live life. I would love to be involved in that.
You touched on something that has been in my heart for the longest time, because we are great of doing ministry or attracting people in either fear-based or either like people that are with great needs. Then you come to a generation where we have a lot of young adults that are professionals, that are doing well, and all of those talks doesn't connect with them.
Yep.
How do we connect with the people that are healthy, they're in a good position, they just choose Jesus for Jesus?
Yeah. I remember being in a Sabbath school class. I was freshly back to church, and I found myself preaching and teaching Sabbath school, very involved in my church. And I was sitting there one time, and we had an older guy teaching, and he was going on and on and on about how young people are always at parties, they're doing drugs like never before, there's all these teen pregnancies, all of this stuff. And I raised my hand and I was like, I don't think you're talking about my generation. He's like, no, I am. I'm talking about young people. I'm like, I think you're talking about your generation. And so together we looked at the statistics for drug use. We looked at the statistics for teen pregnancy. We looked at the statistics for drinking alcohol and parties. And in my generation, and even more and younger than mine, those things have all dropped dramatically since our older people were young.
Like the
that was their
60s and
problem.
70s.
Yes. And it's true that was a real problem for them during their youth, but it's not the same set of problems that our youth are dealing with. They're dealing with isolation, loneliness, not knowing what's true anymore, a whole lot of things that the generations before us didn't necessarily have to go through. But until you actually know people and are involved in their life, you can't understand what's actually going to reach them and how they might connect to each of the things that you're talking about. So it really takes that investment in personal life relationships before you're really going to understand what connects with young people.
And the only way you can understand them is spending time with them.
Yes.
But then we have this bubble that, first of all, life is too busy. Let's be honest, everybody's life is too busy right now. And we think that doing our part as far as being a good Christian is just going to church on Sabbath morning. That's it. That's all it is. So we spend zero time with the people that we criticize, and we know them. We know their needs. We know exactly what is happening to them. And we think that that's mission. That is doing God's work. And it's not. You know, another thing that I say in my seminars, when you do a lot of seminars, you keep remembering things. Sometimes people don't like me too much because I started saying that if you're doing all of this work, because a lot of the people, they're like, oh, I serve the church, I do this position, I do that, and look at the event that I did, and look how hard I worked. And they do work really hard. I'm not taking that away from them. But I was like, if you're doing that, but you're not making disciples. And in this sense, what I was talking about is allowing young people to lead in the church, even though they may not have a clue of what they're doing. And it's going to take a lot more time for you to teach them than to just do it yourself. I get it. But if you're not actually making disciples, mentoring the younger generation, you're not doing God's work. You're working hard, you're working for the church, but God's commission, the greatest commission, is go and make disciple. Making disciple is the imperative. And we don't even realize that we're not doing that.
Yeah. And I think, we get confused on what the metrics might be. We put on an event and we're like, 150 people or 500 people or whatever showed up. And then we think that's going to last as a meaningful kind of piece of their life. And sometimes it does, but I would say a better measure is, how many young people trust you. Not just how many show up when you speak, not just how many show up to the events that you help put on, but how many young people personally trust you. You don't always have to get along. They don't always have to like what you tell them or your preferences or anything, but do they feel safe around you? And do they want to learn from you, even if they disagree with half of the things that you say?
The one thing that I asked the church is, because I was like, we need to create a safe environment that the young people can come and feel safe to talk to you about anything. And they go, oh, we do that. I was like, do you think any of the kids in this church would have the courage to come to you and say that they're questioning their sexual identity?
Yep.
And then they stop because they know they will not do it.
Yeah.
And if having those questions, if the church is not the safest place for them to get the answers, where should it be?
Yeah.
On TikTok?
And we do go to find communities where we will be safe.
Exactly.
In that stage of life when we leave church. Ultimately, what decides whether we come back or not is, will we find a safe community? Will we find a safe group of people that we can live long-term around, that we feel like will be part of the conversation, even if they don't have the answers? Are they part of caring about what we have to say, the questions that we have, the struggles that we're going through? And church very rarely offers that for young people. I think that that's our biggest struggle, is that we always prioritize the program over that. It's the trust building. In my opinion, if I were to have, all of the planning for church and everything, you wouldn't meet every week. You wouldn't have a program every time. There has to be a certain amount of unstructured time for relationship.
I am laughing because every time I come to a church, they and this is something that we have to say with love, because I do not believe there's anybody in our church that intentionally, like the older generation, intentionally, oh, I don't want young people here. No, that's not true. They love and they care for the young people. And I see the younger generation, it's not like they don't want the older generations, but what is happening is they can't understand each other. So I believe both sides have good hearts. Some people don't. But let's just say the majority of the people have good hearts. They have good intentions. They just don't know. They don't understand each other's values and communication and so on.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I say is, well, one of the things that they are frustrated is because they expect that I'm going to come to the church to show them how to do programs for young adults.
Yep.
Because youth, we are filled with programs, and programs are not bad, but programs alone will not take people to Christ. So then they are used to all of those dynamic and pretty much with youth, it still kind of works because one size kind of fits all. If you're going to go on a weekend retreat for pathfinders and different things, in that age, you can still do it. But for young adults, that doesn't work. They're in different phases of life and all at the same time. You can find a 24-year-old that is having kids, that is getting married, another one that doesn't want to have kids. They focus on work, but it's questioning about the work transitions. So they're in such a different style of life that one size does not fit all.
Yep.
So they think I'm the solution. I'm going to come and I'm going to tell them what programs they should make. And they get so disappointed because the first thing I tell them, I will not teach you how to make programs.
Yeah.
And they're lost. They're like, that's all we know. The only thing we know how to do is programs. If I don't do a program, I'm done. And that's pretty much why. So it's like this. We have children's program. We have youth program. College, we still may have a little, but once you graduate, we're like, we're done with you. You're an adult now. Goodbye. And that is the hardest phase of a young adult life. Because now it's the serious decisions.
Yep.
And
you're seeing a big change. Part of the reason we're struggling is the church used to be able to bank on not having to do that work. And the reason was that most young people right around that age were having children. And so what you saw was mid-20s, you saw people becoming parents and focusing on the experience of their children. So you don't have to have a 18 to 35 year ministry program for people who don't have families and kids. You just focus on having families and kind of your middle age and older, because that was the cycle of life. What we're in now is way less young people have children at that age. A dramatic difference from earlier generations. And so now you have all of these people who you don't categorize them as college students at 30 years old anymore, but they're also, a lot of them are still single, or a lot of them just got married and, don't have any kids. So there's a whole age range that the church has no idea what to do with, because we've been in this very traditional mindset. And it's you can hear it almost like spiritualized when people are like, but isn't it God's will that you have kids? Like, isn't it, God's will they get married and all of this stuff? That the idea that somebody could live their life single, or that they could live married without children, all of these different things. To us as younger generations, it's like, I don't think God cares about me less if I do these things. I don't think God says I have to do these things. I don't see any biblical evidence that that's the intent for me, but that God's going to work with me no matter what my family setup looks like throughout the rest of my life. But as a structure, the church has not been forced into the situation where it has to think about that until the past couple of decades. And so you see this real rift where, there's a couple of lost generations now where we still have leadership that for a long, long time has been relatively the same in its values. And you've just seen this exodus of people where if you go into a lot of churches, there's probably a 40-year jump between, the younger group and the older group. All those people in the middle are gone.
And what is interesting is because in the past, people would take comfort because, oh, our young people go through this phase that they leave the church, but they come back. The difference is in the past, people got married much younger and they had kids much younger. As soon as they had kids, once they have kids, they come back. The difference now is this, that the people that used to have kids at 20 through 25, now they're having kids 30, 35. So now we don't have a 3-4 years gap. We have a 10, 15 years gap. And once you have this huge gap in between, I used to go to church and I don't go to church anymore, you got used to it that I don't need church. I don't need God anymore. If they only didn't need church, that's fine. It's when they're like, I'm fine with God, without God. So the church is not and have not been prepared to deal with the different phases that we are facing now.
And I think part of what's going on with that second question, the needing or not needing church doesn't take away your need for community. People will always still find groups of people. In fact, I'm part of several groups of people that were all raised Adventist, and I'm often the only person in those groups who still goes to church. But yet they're still meeting, they still talk about God, they still have a semblance of faith, but church is just not the place that they feel is safe for them. And so they might not be singing songs, but
and that is the thing, is not that they don't like church, it's that they don't feel safe. They have been hurt by the church.
Yeah.
So it's a little different.
And when you ask the question about needing God or not, what you really have to ask is, what are they talking about when they talk about God? Because if your picture of God is just that one that you saw in church, the very exclusive God, the God that doesn't care about human needs, that doesn't love, that is petty. If I can imagine a human being that's kinder than my God, what use do I have for that God? But if God is more loving than the kindest person that I know, if he's more involved and cares more for the people outside of the church walls than I ever could, that's a God I want to follow. And so I think that the rejection of God really has to do more with the rejection of exclusive religion, of controlling religion, of abusive religion, than it does the idea of this loving higher power. I think if you asked people out there, are you positive there's nothing bigger than us? They would say, no, I'm not positive. And then if you ask them, do you care about how people get treated? Do you think that there's something beyond just the natural world? Do you think there's something beyond just, the survival of the fittest? Most people would say yes, and they're still chasing those principles of God, of kindness, of love, of mercy, but they don't associate God with those values anymore.
100%. When I say that they got used to not having church and they leave God, it's exactly because of that.
Yep.
Their idea was so, the character of God that was shown to them was so either distant or plain out evil, because all that he did was watch me to see when I'm making a mistake to punish me. Why would you want that God?
Yeah.
So it's not a problem that they left the church. The problem is that they were presented to the wrong idea of who God is, and then they left God altogether.
Yeah.
That is a serious problem.
Look, I live in one of the most secular areas of the country, and I am welcomed, and I am openly Christian and openly Seventh-day Adventist. I talk about my faith with people who are agnostic and atheist every single week in my community, and they're open. Yes, there's some resistance sometimes where it's like, oh, you probably believe this. No, that's not how I think about it. But my willingness to engage with people and to understand where they're coming from when they have that gut reaction of hurt or fear or distrust, to be able to handle that with care and then say, look, here's how I look at it. And it's very different from what you're talking about. And ultimately, what I really want from you is to know that I care about you and that you're safe around me. Long term, that turns into a respect in your community where you're not this persecuted person where everybody's out to get you. You're welcomed even if people don't see it the same way as you, but you have to be able to understand that the people around you, very often you are the villain in their story. Your religion is the villain in their story, and it is the cause of a lot of hurt and harm in their life. And so if you can hold that truth and just care for it and care for them, you can get past those initial reactions very easily and really open up conversations with people where they're way more open to hearing about what you believe after they know they can trust you.
I'm listening to everything that you're saying, and I absolutely love how your mind works because mine is very similar. So you had a lot of questions since you were a little
Mhm.
kid. You understand how the system works, how the dynamic. It got to a point that you got upset and you left. What
I
I'm
did.
curious to know is what made you come back?
Yeah. So I had several things going on when I left. I told you I was just feeling like nobody ever took the time to get to know me, and beyond me, people who were going through even worse, right? And so I had a couple of instances where um, just really felt like, I don't need this place. And ultimately it's harming my relationship with God. I can keep Sabbath without church. I can do ministry without church. I can have a faith that's full and vibrant without church. What do I need this building for? And so basically, I still kept most of my beliefs. I just said, I don't need to be involved in services. I don't need to be involved in programs. If my parents were going, sure, I'll go with them, but it wasn't part of my rhythm of life anymore. It was a couple of years later. My parents, my mom and my stepdad, we were living in the South, and they moved to this little country area. Started going to this church that had like 12 old people in it, and every once in a while, a grandchild or a college student, but really a dried up, dying place. And they had a younger pastor there. He was still a decade or so older than me, but um, I met him through them. And then, and one more detail of this story, my mom, when her and my dad had gotten divorced, had completely left religion, didn't believe in God anymore, all of this. So I've grown up with a mom who's basically agnostic for most of my life. And then I see her and my stepdad go back to church. So that was really impactful for me, where I'm like, well, if they can do it, I could probably do it. But the second thing is the pastor. So I was used to pastors who put a lot of pressure on me to do more for the church, to, basically, hey, you've been involved here. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you showing up for this? Why aren't you doing this? Not knowing that I'm working all of those hours just to stay renting the place I'm renting, to pay for gas for my car. I would like to see my wife sometimes.
Oh, you are already married at this point.
I got married at 20 years old. So my
Okay.
entire adult life, just about, I've been married. So I had been married multiple years by the time that I left the church. And so a few more years after that is when all of this is happening. And what I saw in the pastor was something I'd never seen before. He never asked me to come back to church. I started talking to him, I think, a Sabbath afternoon at my mom and stepdad's house. Really nice guy. And what he did was he found out that I was working construction in a different town. And he was like, would you ever want to do lunch? And I was like, well, I don't have a lot of money. He's like, no, can I buy you lunch? I was like, yeah, I'm working in this place. I can't really drive far from it. He's like, well, can I meet you for lunch and buy you lunch close to where you're working? Sure. Yeah. So he, took me out for lunch, had a great conversation. This happened multiple times where in my brain, I'm waiting for him to make the sales pitch.
When
I'm
are you
like, I
coming back
know,
to church?
yeah, I grew up in this. I know what you're doing. Like, you're meeting with me because I'm a young person connected to a family that goes to your church and you need more young people. And so I'm just like, okay, at which lunch does he say, you should really come back? You should be involved. You should volunteer. Never did. We interacted a lot. He came over to my house a couple times, and he could handle every question that I had, because he didn't try to have the answers for every question. He was just like, hey, that's a great question. Here's the basic understanding I have. What's your understanding? How do you think about that? Why does that matter to you? What's important to you? And it was all about getting to know me rather than pressuring or shaming or pushing me at all. He got to know me as a friend and as an equal, even though he was a lot more, further along in his professional life and everything, had a family, all of that. And so again, I learned to trust him. On top of that, the church members started doing things that were really practically helpful in my life. So when they found out that I was really struggling financially, several of the older church members, they're like, hey, I need help in my garden on Sunday. Can I hire you? Or, hey, I need help or doing this. And so I started having like odd jobs for them where they would say, we'll give you this much an hour or whatever. And when they actually paid me, they paid me well over what we agreed to. Just little ways of showing love in the exact ways that my life had needs. We weren't on the same page with music. We didn't have the same ideas of how a church service should run. We definitely didn't watch the same TV shows or nothing like that. I mean, our preferences could not be more different. But they found a way at their stage of life to connect with mine. And that's all I ever needed, was just kind of that interest, that trust, and that valuing of me. I started being invited to board meetings. And it was really interesting because I really wasn't attending church, but they said basically, we don't have ideas. We need the perspective of a young person because we can't think outside of ourselves. You don't even have to be like a board member, but can you just give us some guidance? You have ideas, you have all of these thoughts. And I think that would really help us change the direction that we're
That
going.
that is amazing.
It is. And I don't know many people who had that opportunity. So I took it, and I found this love for them because they were trying, they were trying in a way that wasn't manipulative, that was really meeting me and seeing me and involved in my life. And so I ended up, the church that brought me back was a 12-member senior citizen church. Like, it wasn't, no smoke machines, no contemporary Christian music, nothing cool about it. And even just theologically, I would say there were some major differences between how I read the Bible and they did, but they were open. I had a seat at the table. I could say, I see it this way. You see it that way.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been telling people, hey, it's not about the fog machine. It's not about the lights. It's not about the contemporary music. It's about relationships.
Yep.
I can tell you a young person would be happy in your church if they know that you love them, that you care for them. And
Mm-hmm.
we do everything backwards.
Yep.
You're the first person who actually confirmed.
Well, let me give you an opposite case study in my life. There's a person in my, circle, older person, raised Adventist, very polite, nice person. But whenever we talk, if I talk about the movie that I saw, they'll be like, oh, probably shouldn't have seen that. If I talk about the food that I like, if I talk about the music that I like, if I talk about just about anything from my life, it gets redirected to this very traditional understanding. And so the entire conversation that I have with this person ends up being about them. It's their way all the time. And so despite the fact that they're nice, despite the fact that they'll make good food if we're together or anything like that, there's no room for me to exist in that relationship. And I think that that's what a lot of young people are going through when they come to churches. It's not about please and thank you, yes ma'am, no ma'am. It's not about necessarily whether they have food or not. It's, does that person feel like they can exist as a full human being, have their thoughts heard, have their concerns listened to, and do they feel like people are interested in them? How much of the conversation is getting to know their life and doing things that they like to do rather than the older person?
And this is what a lot of the older generation don't understand. The analysis that you just made right now,
Mm-hmm.
understanding of can I exist here as a person?
Mm-hmm.
You know how many young people understand what you just said? like in their own conscience.
Yeah.
Like what actually happens is they go to a place, and I'm talking about younger than you,
Yep.
probably at your age, they are already aware. But a lot of times what happens is they come to a church or they come to a conversation, they deal with somebody like that, they feel horrible, they feel guilty, they feel shame, they don't understand out of the perspective of what is happening, because you are almost having a bird's eye view, like an outsider looking into this conversation. A lot of the people don't have that understanding.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the young people cannot understand what is happening, so they feel horrible.
Yeah.
And if they were already not feeling comfortable with their own skin, if they already had questions, if they already had questions about their worthiness within themselves and with God, we just made it worse.
And you lump all of that into, this is what religion is, this is what church is, and this is what God is.
Yes.
So we get this jumble of anxiety, fear, shame, and we lump it all together into this understanding of religion and faith and God. And it's no wonder that people say, I really don't want that. And when they leave, suddenly, oh, no one's criticizing my taste in music. Oh, nobody's mad if I didn't go somewhere. Oh, suddenly it's this freedom.
I am accepted everywhere else,
But the
except
church.
for the place where we should be known by loving one another.
Yes. So they get to know other people as the ones who love them, but not the church.
Yeah. And then we question why we have so many different and crazy beliefs out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was actually watching, just scrolling through social media, and one of my greatest frustration, the algorithm don't push my stuff. It's very low engagement. And then I came across this person who is actually a witch.
Mm-hmm.
And she has 4 million billion, I don't know, it's so many followers and views and stuff like that, and I'm upset at this. And one of the things that she posted was like, what, and then she posted all of the different religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jewish, Christianity. She put everything, and she says, you know what, none of this I'm trying to remember how she said it, but it's pretty much like they're all the same. They all come from the same foundation, which is love, which, by the way, that's not wrong, because I believe most religions do believe in love and everything. But then I looked at the engagement. Then I looked at how many people are following. And I found out that my sister in my country follows this person.
Yeah.
And then you start questioning why, because they're listening to an inclusive, loving message that we Christians don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we question why they're going to a very, how can I put this? Not Christ.
Yeah.
Without putting any other words, this is not what the Bible says. This is completely against everything that we believe. And then, of course, Christians would say, but that is witchcraft. That is the devil. That is evil. That's why they're popular. That's why they're this. And I understand, and I do not, especially because I come from, even before I became full-on atheism, I had big influence on spiritualism. So I don't play with the devil. I don't play with stuff like that at all. I know that is of the devil, and I stay away from it. But sometimes we need to understand, is the devil showing more love than we are?
It's interesting when you read the stories of Jesus. When you see how he goes about his ministry, people flocked to him. He was magnetic, and not just like the popular people, but the common people, the poorest people, the ostracized people in his community wanted to be near him.
Some of the rich as well.
Of course, but he was able to connect with the ostracized members in his community. Christianity does not currently have that in place. Okay, we have a repellent system. So the way that we have done religion, the way that we have done church, is not one where people flock to us for safety, for hope. It's not that doesn't exist, but when we're talking about dying churches, when we're talking about aging churches, we're seeing the complete opposite phenomenon that Jesus had, where Jesus was a magnet for people. And so when we lose that spirit of interacting with people, when we lose those principles behind all of these rules, this is the effect of that, right? And so I think that a religion that is Christ-like is a religion that can connect with the ostracized in community.
And I think what is frustrating, it's kind of like a good news, but I'm saying that it's frustrating is because this wave of people not wanting to be in the church is changing a little. The research shows that Gen Zs are coming back to church.
Yep.
But then when you start reading the details of that, you learn that it's not all Gen Zs. They are mostly, the ones that are coming are mostly male, very small percentage of women. And the reason why they're coming, it's not because, well, they say it's because of they love Jesus, but basically when the research was looking to more details, it's because men felt that they lost the control and the power that they had, and the rhetoric that is being sent out from Christianity today gives them that power back.
Yes. Yep.
And it's very frustrating to imagine that that is the reason why people are coming back to Christ.
Yeah, it is. And I think Gen Z is a really interesting, generation to watch, because in some ways they've seen all of the rules fall apart. Actually, I think millennials saw the rules fall apart. I think Gen Z lives in the aftermath. So all of the ways that a 9-to-5 job works, all of the ways that government works, all of the ways that religion works, all of those different things have essentially fallen apart before Gen Z became adults. So they're in a world where there isn't as much structure. There isn't as much certainty on what's true and what's not, and what's real and what's not, what's the way that you're supposed to do things and what's not. And so I can see how somebody would want some kind of explanation for life, some kind of rule structure, some kind of guidance, right? It's very important for us that we create something that isn't just about them gaining worldly control, like the aspects of Christianity that are attracting young men who really emphasize them being in charge, right? But if we can create something
women can talk, women to be submissive,
and
all of that.
So it's not always just good that people are coming back to church. The why is really, really important.
Yes, understanding the why. It's very important. I love to hear how you came back to the church, that you had this pastor that understood that he needed to come to you to care for you without an agenda. And if you happen to come back to the church, you came back to the church. But if you didn't, to still love you and accept you. That for me is fantastic. Okay, let's switch gears just a little bit. What is the hope? What do you see as what we can do? We understand what is bad. How can we move on, and what we can do to do better?
I think that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is uniquely positioned to provide practical and social places of safety and hope for the world in a way that not every denomination is. When you look at so many of the issues that young people care about, it's the treatment of other people and the treatment of the planet. Adventism has a long and storied history of those things that we've gotten away from. When you even just talking about the Sabbath, we love talking about the Sabbath as this God-ordained, thing that you should keep. And that's true. But there's more than that for the secular-minded person who is burnt out in American culture, who has been exploited for their labor and paid nothing, who is constantly feeling like there's no time for themselves, for their family, for any further thought of what's real out there. When you say this pattern, this rhythm of setting aside a consistent day of the week every single week is incredibly useful for your health, your sanity, your mental health, your family relationships, your social relationships. Start with all of that and then say there's a God who created that for you, right? Everybody thinks, there's a whole mentality in our church that kind of liberal-minded people are a lost cause, that you have to make them kind of these conservative kind of thinkers and whatever. But we have answers for everybody.
Or stay away from them because they're going to influence you. Yeah.
They've given up. It's crazy, but you look at the story of Abraham, and he begged God to go back into Sodom and Gomorrah to just find anybody.
Moses.
He was on behalf of the people. We've lost that care, right? We've become Jonah, where we get upset when people come back in that don't agree with us. where we need to be is the type of people who say, like, hey, I believe in a God that cares about those things that you care about. And here is how he's been working for those things since the beginning of time. When you talk about social relationships, there's a lot in the Bible. Jesus specifically went and ministered to people who they were the victims of racial harm, right? When you look at the woman at the well, you're seeing a story of an oppressed woman who was in a culture that could very easily harm her and probably had harmed her quite a bit. And going to a rabbi, talking to a Jewish rabbi who was the people group who oppressed her people. And then he was in a group of 13 men who thankfully 12 of them went off for them to have that conversation. When you look at it from the perspective of this woman, she's entering a space that felt unsafe. She's entering into a space of a people group and a gender and a position that had mistreated her people and people like her for generations. What Jesus did was he offered that space of safety. He took the time to ask her and talk to her about her life in a non-judgmental way. And why she was so excited, it was that she had found somebody who challenged and went against all of that harm that she had experienced. That's what Christianity should be. When we talk about the LGBTQ community, when we talk about women, when we talk about race in America, when we talk about young people and old people, when we talk about disability, no matter where you look, no matter what cultural lens or gender lens or anything you put, Christians should be the people who offer that space of safety and curiosity like Jesus did. That's what we change. That's the hope, is that we emphasize that over everything else, that we become people like Jesus was. Because that's where people say, I really want to be involved in this. I really, if you're like this and God has affected you this way and made you this kind of person, I can't imagine how much better God is.
Yes. Yes. It's like you love the people so much that they want to know who's the God you serve.
Yeah. That's the ultimate hope. And whatever that looks like, whatever the buildings and programs and everything gets shaped around that, if that's the core, then you start seeing healing in every community that we're involved in. And instead of being these people that go into these different areas and try to convince people and talk them into it and shame them into it, just the way that we live our lives and the way that we interact with them and care for them and love them is far more of a message than talking them into it. Put in a sentence, my hope is that when people hear a Christian or an Adventist is nearby, they feel relieved.
Yes, yes. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Going back to what we mentioned about clothing. I forgot again. I know it was relationship. Okay, forget it. Just. And I know it was important. Anyways, maybe it wasn't, because I wouldn't have forgot it if it was that important. Okay. I think we just went already beyond the time that I thought. I mean, I planned for 1 hour, but this was so good. Okay, so let me end this. Caleb, this was so good. I wanted to continue talking to you for another 2 hours.
Problem.
Because it feels like there's so much more that we can unpack with everything that we've been talking. Mm-hmm. And I love talking to people that pretty much we have very similar minds and we understand mm-hmm. what's happening. It's not about how much I know, how much I'm great, but mm-hmm. it's how important people are.
Yeah.
And how we need to allow the Holy Spirit to work in people's life. My job is to love them. Mm-hmm. And we allow the Holy Spirit to make the change in whatever they need to make the changes, you know. That was one of the things when I went to the Amazon. I had like a list of what I thought a Christian should look like. And God did not allow me to act that way because he started showing me then that his priority list may be very different than mine, and he knows mm-hmm. what each person needs to change.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing what you do, the interviews, and I did have one more question for you.
Sure.
What kept you going?
Yeah. So when I look at my life and I think about what's the reason that I continue to live, we didn't get into this in my story, but I had many years of my life where I struggled really hard with thoughts of suicide. really hard. And thankfully, I ended up coming through that and finding a healthier pattern of life. But now I feel like every day that I'm alive is more than I expected to. And so I wake up every day and I ask, what good can I do in the world? How can I show Jesus to the world around me? Every single day. It's not about getting rich by the end of my life. It's just, how do I help the people around me become safe, happy, loved? And I think part of what's kept me going is I've had a few really good models for that. And I've been able to see over time how investing in people's lives, like the pastor did for me, has really helped them. And so I wake up every day thinking about the possibilities. I think about all of the different ways that you could do that for somebody else. And so I think, I just have this drive where I recognize I am a 6'2" white American man. I've been given the birth lottery, right? I've been given every privilege the world has to offer other than wealth. And specifically within the Adventist church, I have a long history with the Adventist church. I know our beliefs. I know more about Ellen White than the average Adventist does. My family has lived through things because they were Adventist and actually faced some persecution because they were Adventist. And so with that deep cultural and religious understanding, where can I make the most good in the world? It's by making my church as close to Jesus as possible.
Amen.
Right. And so I would say the drive is both frustration that we're not doing that, and also just this stubborn hope that we still can.
But I really admire the fact that you could be doing anything else.
Sure.
You could have given up, but you said, because, by the way, what do you do now? What is your job?
Yeah, so I work in the short answer is I work in the communication department of the Oregon Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. That is a job that was built around work that I was doing for free and then as a freelancer, mostly telling stories, sharing non-theological stories of current and former Seventh-day Adventists. And so, it was an online project that I started back in 2017, very controversial.
What was the name of the project?
Humans of Adventism.
Okay, so it was you.
Yep.
I got exposed a little bit to it. Yes, I did see some of your work.
Yep. And so now I've helped create a number of creative projects for every level of the church. There's the How the Church Works podcast, which is about our culture and our structure. There's Bridges Over Walls, which is just about what we're talking about, relational barriers that Christians and Adventists create and what to do about them. But at the end of the day, I help tell the stories of local churches and community centers and Pathfinder groups and camps here in Oregon. And then I'm always working on relational projects with my community as well.
So like I started saying, you could be doing anything else that you probably would be making much more money, because I know no conference job pays a lot.
True. Very unfortunately true.
And you were hurt, but then you came back and you said, let me do something about this. What can I, because sometimes the frustration, and I'm talking a lot about the time that I was a missionary, but I remember one time God started working in my heart, and I started seeing like the real problems in the place, and the poverty was so great. People didn't have access to not even things that we take for granted, like running water and toilet. Okay. And the poverty, the diseases, the parents giving their own children for human trafficking, thinking that they would have a better life, not understand what they were giving their children to, and drugs and all of that kind of stuff. And I remember one day just like how do you say, like I just felt, I didn't lay in bed, I just plot into the bed and said, God, it doesn't matter how much I work, doesn't matter how hard I work, it's like it's not even touching this much. It's like I'm not making any difference. And I remember, I'm not one of the kind of people that hear God's talking to me all the time and stuff like that, but sometimes there is that little voice that is really different than yours, and it's not you. And I felt God telling me, you're not going to be able to change the whole world. Focus on the people that I put right in front of you.
Yeah.
And that changed everything for me, because I was frustrated because I wasn't making a difference. And God told me, take care of those that is in front of you, which now I take so much more serious the responsibility when anybody asked me for a Bible study, when anybody asked to talk to me, which I always did give them the attention. But now I started realizing that that is the person that God is giving it to me, and He changed a lot.
Yeah.
And for the same thing with you, I'm sure it's frustrating sometimes because we wanted to see more change. We want to see faster change. We want more people to understand I am not working against the church. I'm working in favor of the church. And we have so many people that doesn't understand what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
But you have never given up. You're still here. You're still a great voice. I love the work you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've been telling you for a while, hey, I want to see when we can collab.
Yeah. That was awesome.
Yes. So I really loved getting to know you. Do you have like a last word for someone that is probably going through the phase that you were going through when you just left the church for a while and then came back? Or it doesn't even have to be that. People that
Yeah.
are like giving up hope, not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Do you have any last words?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things I would say. Number one is it's entirely possible to have a healthy faith between you and God, and sometimes some distance helps with that. So I know that's not the advice you usually hear from pastors or organized church members, but there is value to exploring, laying out all of your beliefs on the table, saying, why do I believe what I believe? Do I believe this? And if not, why? The second thing is, for those of us who have gone through this frustration and even harm at the hands of the church, we tend to be the people who can see the issues most clearly. Until you have suffered through some of these things, it's really hard to see it. Or until someone you love has suffered through these things, it's very hard to see it. And so it's not just, I think that our pain can be a calling. I think that when we take that understanding of, this is how I was affected by this thing, and I want to make sure that it doesn't happen for the next person, I think that becomes powerful ministry that I've seen happen over and over again. If you were sexually abused in the church, you have a unique understanding of how that can happen and how to stop it. If you grew up in a place that was all fear-based and that really damaged how you related to other people and interacted with other people, you have a unique understanding of how that comes together. For me, just feeling not seen, not heard, not loved, and not like I'm in a place that's involved in my community. When I came back to church, those became the things that I'm all about. Those became the passion that drives me to make a difference for high school kids, Pathfinders, college kids, people in my community. All of those things that I've lived through have been important lessons. Even if I don't think God ever wanted them to happen, He can still use them in order to create a better story for someone else. And even if you only make that difference for one person, maybe, I don't know how many people that pastor has reached in his lifetime, but I know he reached me. And through me, he's reaching a whole lot of other people now. So it's just the start of this snowball. You just get something rolling. You minister to the people in front of you. And as they return the favor, as they pay that love forward, you can change the world, but you don't have to do it all yourself.
Amen. I love it. Caleb, thank you so much. I really enjoyed, and I
You're
hope we
welcome.
can do this again.
Sure. Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.